Well, good morning, Tampa. This is John Dingfelder, and our show is Down and Dirty with WMNF. I'm joined this morning by Skip, who's running the board. Good morning, Skip.
Hey, good morning, John.
Irene is answering the phones. Morning, Irene. How are you? And we have my guest host, Allison Hewitt. Good morning, Allison.
Good morning.
So nice of you to join us on this day after Thanksgiving. Yes, I think we're all feeling a little bloated. At least I know I am. And I am tickled pink to introduce our guest. Our guest is Sadie, and Sadie has written a book. And I'll let her talk about it and describe it in a second. Oh, I guess I need to just say her name is Sadie Dingfelder, and she's my beautiful, talented daughter, brilliant in every way, and she's written a book, and I think it's fascinating. I probably like the book because she mentions me a few times in it, more than a few, I guess. But we'll talk about that too. But good morning, Sadie.
Good morning, Dad.
How was your Thanksgiving?
It was pretty delicious. Lynn did a great job. Adriana did a fantastic job.
And you're hanging out with your brother and his family, and they're so wonderful.
I am so thankful that I get to hang out with my whole family. COVID really made me thankful about being able to hang out with my long-distance family in a way that I did not expect.
Yeah, the deprivation.
Yeah, it really sucked.
Yeah. And don't forget Stevie, your other half.
I mean, Steve's great, but he didn't do Thanksgiving this year because he had his gallbladder out right before we got here. I know, poor thing.
Yeah, he was hurting a little bit. And we missed his delicacies because he is a great cook.
He's a gourmet chef.
So, Sadie, before we jump into the book, let's just introduce the audience to you. Where were you born? Where did you grow up?
I was born in Blacksburg, Virginia. I feel like I'm being quizzed. Yeah. Because we didn't live there.
We did move a lot.
Yeah, we moved a ton. But we finally settled in Tampa when I was going into fifth grade. And so I went.
There were about 5 or 6 stops in between.
Many stops, including Cedar Grove, New Jersey, Orlando, Gainesville, Tallahassee.
See, you do know. You passed that test.
But we landed in Tampa. And I went to Gorey for 5th grade and 6th grade.
Gorey Elementary in Hyde Park.
Yeah, and then I went to Wilson for 7th and 8th grade because they were transitioning. It was just 2 years. And then I went to Plant, HB Plant, in 9th grade.
High school, public high school,
9th through
right
12th.
There off of Dale Mabry, because we are regional. So we need to give people a context of.
Right. Oh, okay.
Yeah, but. Okay, so your book is called what?
It's called Do I Know You? A Faceblind Reporter's Journey into the Science of Sight, Memory, and Imagination. And it's about my really surprising discovery. At the age of 40, actually I was 39, I was working at the Washington Post, and I found out that I'm faceblind, and I have always been faceblind my entire freaking life.
And frankly, until you divulged this to the family, I'd never even heard of it. I didn't even mean anything, not to mention the scientific name, which is
prosopagnosia.
Yeah, I couldn't get that right either.
I practiced that and Googled it.
Go for it. Allison,
do you have
go for it.
Nope, I do not.
Prosopagnosia. How'd I do, Sid?
That sounds right to me.
All right.
All I know is face and
blind.
Allison, had you ever heard of it before? Oh.
Because I watch TV. Brilliant Minds is on, and they have their main character is faceblind.
I didn't know that.
Until that, which it just came out this season, I hadn't heard of it. So, but before when you sent me the book, I was like, Brilliant Minds. I watched that, and they showed how he sees folks right in the beginning episode. You know, the blurry, he can see chins and stuff. And so he was looking at people, what they wore, they smell, the cologne, the way they walked. So, you know, they may have to, shuffle their feet, and that's how he recognized people, and how folks were getting irritated because, like, I passed by you 3 times and you didn't say hello.
Wow.
And so I just this season met the TV show.
And Sadie, I assume you watch that too, or what?
Yes, I watch every episode of Brilliant Minds, and I recap it on my website,
Is it accurate?
sadid.com.
I mean, sometimes Hollywood, doesn't do a good job of making scientific things accurate.
The way they visualize face blindness is probably actually it was the closest I've seen to what I've read about the science of face blindness, because obviously it's really hard for me to say how I see faces differently than someone else because I've only ever seen them the way I see them, right? But science suggests that people who are face blind see faces in a more piecemeal fashion. So whereas neurotypical people see faces as what they call a gestalt, but it's like a whole like object. People who are face blind see faces as a collection of features, like an eye, a nose, a mouth, and they actually did sort of show that sort of like focus when they were doing Dr. Oliver Wolf's visual perspective. And by the way, he was based on Oliver Sacks, the very famous neuroscientist neurologist who was face blind and wrote amazing stories for The New Yorker, including a famous book called The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat.
But you never would mistake your spouse, right?
Right. Well, interestingly, so that's just called visual agnosia. I have mistaken my spouse for another man, but I've never mistaken Steve for a hat.
No. When that was at the peanut butter store.
The peanut butter story, yeah, that one.
Yes.
Tell us that one.
Okay, so this was kind of the moment of where I was finally willing to say, maybe, Sadie, you are not quite having a neurotypical experience in life. And so I was at the grocery store following Steve around, and I see him. He just goes.
And by the way, we need to describe Steve. He's about 6 foot.
He's 6'4", very large man. Strangers call him boss. Like when we travel around the world, random people call him boss. No one ever does that.
He's a gentle giant, but he is a big guy.
He's huge. Yeah, so there was another big guy in the grocery store, I guess, because I started following around the wrong person without realizing it. And when he started putting all his junk food in the cart I just decided to roast him for it. I was delighted. I like junk food, but Steve eats really well. And so I pulled out like generic peanut butter and I said, "Since when do you buy generic?" And this man looked back at me, and it wasn't until he looked terrified and horrified that I noticed he wasn't Steve. Like I looked right at him, and basically his face almost reconfigured itself in my vision. And actually, I had a similar experience yesterday. And I bet this is something that happens to people. It wasn't with a face, but I was looking at a rope in the water. And my brain 100% projected a stingray onto it. I saw a huge stingray in the ocean.
You were pretty adamant, too.
I was completely adamant.
I was pretty clear it was a rope in the water. But you were like, you stuck with it. Stingray. Watch out, Jack. It's a stingray.
Yeah, well, I literally saw a stingray, a big old stingray. And so your brain, even though maybe I have this more often than neurotypical people, I bet that, you can tell me, have you ever seen something that's not there, but your brain projected, if maybe a plastic bag skittering across the street and you think it's a rat, and you really see it for a split second?
Going back to your childhood, now that you mention it, I think a lot of children are into fantasy world and fantasy land and fantasy books and that sort of thing. But I think you really gravitated toward a lot of that. And maybe that was part of it. Just in terms of creatures or like the Hobbit and what was that other one, Roald Dahl, that you liked?
I love books, but
they're strange animals, strange looking things. It wasn't just about Fido the dog. You know what I'm saying? Right?
Maybe. But interestingly, so I don't have a visual imagination, right? So when I'm reading Roald Dahl or The Hobbit or anything like that, I'm not imagining little critters. And when I see the movie, I never think, oh, those critters are wrong, because I literally am just reading for plot.
And I am the exact opposite, which I told her when I said the book, I'm a reader. I told her I'm a reader. I read at least 2 books a week, but I am fiction. I am in her first page when she asked all these her intro on, do you visualize? Do you see? books for me takes me out of my reality, and I am in that book. And I can picture it. And yes, I'm the one that says in the book that is not how he was dressed or what he looked like.
What is it, the mind's eye? You got a strong mind's eye?
Very, very strong. But what I appreciate about the book is, although she may not be the one that pictures it, in this book, with all the science and all the data, she wove in some of the most interesting stories that really then connected me to that scientist that escaped through the Danube.
Across the Danube.
Yeah, so she put her storytelling, from what you said and what she did in the past, she has woven her storytelling into this incredible story about science and real life and issues. And so I just say kudos to you as a person who does not read nonfiction and does not really do science. You were able to really pull me in with all the stories you have intertwined, especially the visit to the conference in St. Pete, in which Pops went to with you.
Yeah, that happened. My book happens so much in Tampa. A lot of it is like my experiences in high school and in the Tampa Bay area. But later, I do write about my dad and I went to a fantastic conference that happens in St. Pete every year. It's called the Vision Society Science, VSS.
And who knew there's 1,000 little scientists running around, and meeting in St. Pete every year, talking about all these scientific studies and vision studies and stuff.
And like maybe half is an exaggeration, but I would say at least a quarter of the studies dealt with face recognition, because vision scientists are obsessed with face recognition, because we have a whole chunk of brain devoted to recognizing faces, and they know exactly where it is. So you can do a lot of cool studies just because that information. It's one of the few parts of our brain that is so specialized.
So Allison, I don't know if you noticed, perhaps in the bio or somewhere in the book, but Sadie didn't just stumble across this science writing. Because, we'll tell where you were, Sadie, for 10 years in your beginning of your career.
Oh, yeah. I worked at the American Psychological Association, and I was the
senior. Access?
I know, yeah. I was the senior science writer, and I had access to the PsycInfo database that they never, they took away recently. I'm very sad, but I think they just updated their website. It wasn't personal.
They wanted Sadie to be the editor of the magazine because her boss left. And I said, Sadie, their boss left. I said, be the editor, be the editor. And she said, what'd you say? You said, no way, I don't want to manage all these other people.
Yeah.
She said, I just want to write.
Totally. Yeah. That's what happens when you're good at your job, is they try to promote you to management, but then you're like, I'm not a manager, I'm a writer. Like, I'm a terrible manager.
So when you left the APA and you went to?
The Washington Post. And it was great. I loved going to the Post. We had like a big sprawling building it was before Jeff Bezos bought it.
Yeah, the old building.
The old building was sprawling, and it was clearly it felt like a crumbling empire, there was a area of misfit technology, like just old computers and just.
Didn't you see the Watergate guy at one point or something?
I only ever saw his office. He never came into the office, and he had a whole office with a door and everything. They should have given that to someone.
That's pretty cool.
Bill Woodward's corner.
That's it, Woodward. But anyway,
Bob, sorry, Bob.
Bob, yeah, that's right. So anyway, you. So here you are. You had 10 years of the APA. You knew about science writing, research, science writing. Then you're writing interesting sort of a day in the life of Sadie Dingfelder stories at the Washington Post. And then how did we get to this book?
Well, so. Yeah, I wrote we had this little daily paper called the Washington Post Express, which was my home at the Post. But
kind of like Creative Living here, they give it away for free on the street.
On the Metro, yeah.
Very interesting, fun stuff.
Yeah. But that paper was on its way out, sadly, because of cell phones, smartphones, really, and specifically smartphone access in the DC Metro, which is very deep underground. Anyway. But I regularly wrote for other sections too. And my favorite section to write for was the magazine, because they just gave you however much space you needed to tell an amazing story.
They pay you by the word.
And I did get paid in addition, right? I had to do it on weekends. I couldn't work on my magazine story at work. But anyway, so what happened? Yeah, so I went and... Well, what happened was grocery store incident. And then some time elapsed, and then I tried to write it down. And I thought it was a really funny story. And I sent it to my friends who are editors, and they were all reading that story and other stories I'd written, and they were like, these stories, like, don't make any sense. Like, and I'm like, yeah, they do. I'm hilarious. And they're like, no, like, why are you making all these weird mistakes all the time? Like, what's the real story here? Because I feel like a good news editor can sense when you're kind of writing around something that you don't understand. And I was like, well, I don't know. And that was really kind of the trigger that made me start investigating face blindness.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so then I started emailing people, professors, and scientists, and I was like, do you have any tests I can take? Blah, blah, blah. I got myself enrolled in a study at Harvard. And I was like, they wanted me to fly to Harvard. And, that's expensive. So I pitched it as a story to the Washington Post magazine to pay for my flight to Boston. And I remember the editor, who I loved, he said, do you really think you're face blind? And I said, nah, I just think I'm below average, but it's going to be a killer story because it's a really interesting topic. And then I found out that I have the face recognition abilities of a below average macaque.
So I want to get back to that Harvard experience because I think people will be interested to see how do they study you. But in the meantime, let's do a little station identification. This is WMNF. This is Down and Dirty. I'm John Dingfelder, your host. I'm joined with my co-host, Allison Hewitt. And our guest today is my daughter, Sadie Dingfelder, who's talking about her book, Do I Know You? A Faceblind Reporter's Journey into the Science of Sight, Memory, and Imagination. All right, ladies, we're going to take David. He's been very patient. David from Davenport. David, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Hi, how are you?
Hey, good morning. Thanks for hanging in there.
Thanks. I wanted to mention with that Brilliant Mind show, I read that that's like based on Oliver Sacks, the famous physician, and he wrote a lot of books about kind of anomalies like this. So I thought that was interesting. And then I'm the opposite. I am good with faces, but I'm not good with names. And I don't know if is that a special disorder name too?
You know what's so interesting? So a lot of people, most of the time, if you ask people if they're good or bad at any skill, most people think they are above average. But if you survey people about remembering names, everyone thinks that they are below average. And to me, this means, so this is so common. This is a super common experience. It's actually technically known as lethanomia, after the Greek river in the afterlife called Lethe that you drink from and you forget your life. But anyway, it's just forgetting names. And there are there's some really cool research on why we forget names. Totally different from face blindness.
Maybe that's the next book, Allison. Yes. David, thanks for calling.
Thanks, David.
And we appreciate you listening. Happy Thanksgiving. And Skip and I will attest to the fact that as you thank you, Sadie. As you get a little bit older, the names definitely start drifting away.
They certainly do. Your brain matter just doesn't work like it used to, no matter how hard you try.
And we don't even have a fancy title for that one.
No,
it's just
old.
It's just being, quote, seniors. I hate that. All right. So Harvard.
Yeah.
And then eventually Berkeley.
Yeah.
But tell, you have a picture on your website that it's almost a little creepy looking, Sadie, but they got little gadgets hooked up to your head.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's that?
So so it turns out that.
And if I had known they were going to hook you up to the gadgets, I wouldn't have let you go.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So it turns out that researchers, vision scientists, love people who have prosopagnosia. So if you are very bad at faces, you can probably get yourself into a study. if you have a kid who's really bad at faces, everyone's looking for kids to research and to try to help
little guinea pigs,
remediate their face recognition issues. Because it probably is possible to help people when they're younger, but once you're locked in and older, it's really hard to teach people how to see faces normally.
But you had to be very patient. You had to sit still for hours on end, right, with these gadgets hooked up to you. And
let me just say, it's not just sitting still, because I can sit still.
I can't sit
But she had to sit still and pay attention to the slides in front of her. See, I would have sat still and been in my brain or taken a nap. But she had to sit still in a loud machine and then press a button every time. I think the plus sign changed colors.
Yeah, that was dull.
Oh my God! So that's a new extent of sitting still. If you got to sit still and pay attention.
All right, so we could talk about that for a long time. But so that they diagnosed you.
Well, it's interesting because prosopagnosia by itself is not a diagnosis. You can't get just any sort of.
No Medicaid,
no Medicaid. Yeah, you can't get your insurance to reimburse treatment, but also there's no treatment, so it doesn't matter. But it's very common among people with other neurodivergences that are diagnosable, like autism and ADHD and dyslexia, dyspraxia. All the ones that are in the DSM.
Which just you don't have. Right? I mean, you're not.
Well, it's interesting because, I definitely don't, quote unquote, meet the criteria for autism. But I bet, if I took a battery, I would be, certainly above average for, some traits. For instance, I realized I never wore jewelry my entire life. I hate jewelry.
And your grandfather was a jeweler. And it's true. She was always offered jewelry. She was always offered jewelry and pierced earrings and beautiful stuff. And,
yeah.
Okay, why? So what?
Well, I think it's sort of a sensory integration issue. I don't like stuff on my body. I never wore a bra either. Yes. Oh, and, a lot of social pressure to wear bras, to wear jewelry. And I think that...
Of course, the older your grandmother got, the less she wore a bra, too.
Yeah.
And to this day, doesn't. And she and Sadie bond on that braless faces.
Stockings, pantyhose have gone out of style. I think bras are next. And high heels. Done.
Yes.
We're not going to be oppressed anymore.
Amen. Can I vote for that? I'll put that out in the ether. Make all high heels go away.
Yeah.
Allison, you read this book in the last couple of days. What questions do you have?
Well, as I was saying
comments
earlier, I truly believe in telling your story. And because you never know when it's going to connect to someone or give them an aha moment. I'm not just not paying attention or dopey.
Or spacey. I used to refer to my daughter as spacey, and now I feel bad about that.
Yeah, she addresses the parental guilt in the book,
I've got a lot of guilt.
And so...
it's a Jewish thing.
And it's it must be a Catholic thing, too.
Definitely Catholic thing.
But what I wanted to ask is, as you were going down, did you potentially notice, because I really do appreciate your friend group that actually saw you, but did you notice people around you who you thought maybe that's why they're like that? Did you have a more clearer understanding of folks you might not have thought you understood, but now?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, wow. I think that all of us sort of assume that everyone else in the world has basically the same experience we have. And I've learned that, boy, is that certainly not true for me, right? Because me assuming that everyone around me, can't visualize, because I can't visualize. I assume that everyone around me is as bad at faces as I am, and we're all faking it all the time. I don't have a great autobiographical memory, so I didn't understand why people had trouble getting over moments from their past, because I don't even remember, Mm-hmm. Man, I can make someone mad and forget, that person is mad at me completely. And the next time we hang out and they're still mad at me, I'm like, what is going on with Collie or whatever, And now if someone seems randomly mad at me, I know to ask someone.
So that part is a SDAM?
Yeah, that's called severely deficient autobiographical memory. So some listeners... Okay, some of you listeners out there have an amazing autobiographical memory. You can actually...
My mother.
Oh, really?
Your Uncle Bill?
I don't know about him.
Remembers everything.
Yeah, but okay. So people with amazing autobiographical memories are usually pretty visual, and they can actually do what it's known as mental time travel. So if you can transport yourself to a moment from your past where you actually sort of relive it in sensory detail, that's called autobiographical or episodic memory. And I literally don't have that ability. Literally don't have the ability. Did not realize anyone else could do it.
Yeah, so as you were saying that, I sort of closed my eyes a little bit. And I've told the story many times about how Eddie Spaghetti and I were hitchhiking out in Colorado, and we got lost up in the mountains and for a couple of days.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, a couple of days. But it was summertime, and we had food and water.
We need to call him and check your details with his details.
I think we have talked about it several times, and they're pretty similar.
Okay.
But I can close my eyes and just see it.
Wow.
I can see it, and I can see that moment that we finally saw a little tiny car going down a little tiny road, and we were like, oh, my God, civilization. But anyway, yeah, so I don't know. So what does that mean about me? I can see things in my brain.
Most people can, you know, and it's one of these things that's like every psychology book I ever read, because I've been interested in psychology my whole life. Every memory chapter is like, your brain is not a video camera. You're not really remembering what you saw. And I know this from a neurological perspective, you're reconstructing it. But from an experiential perspective, I didn't understand that for people, it really does feel like a video for many people. Yeah. And again, for me, my entire past is just a story just told in words. I could have read a book about myself.
Where do you fit on that spectrum, Allison?
In her introduction on page 9, when she says, no wonder y'all so slow, I'm the slow one, because I get caught up in the books, because I am in that field of flowers. I am on that mountain. And I can tell you, when I went to Hawaii in 1988,
wow,
what it was like on the black sand beach.
Wow.
I can tell you what I was wearing. I can tell you how warm the sand, black sand beach, feels under my feet. So I am that.
Jealous?
I'm super jealous. I am jealous, and a lot of people with SDAM are pretty jealous, and because they're like, oh my God, like so and so died. I wish I could spend time in my mind with like this person who passed away. And I'm totally jealous.
And on the flip side, that also caused a lot of you need to go into therapy, because you need to really put some of those memories in actual context. So,
yeah, totally.
So it's just 50, 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other, to remember everything that clearly. You can remember all the negative too.
Totally.
And so sometimes I wish I could just be,
Yeah, exactly. What I found out is that neurotypical people, it's not just that you can relive these beautiful moments. You are also pelted by terrible moments. Like your most embarrassing moment comes back. I mean,
you still cringe. Yes.
I'm so sorry. I had a friend who was describing to me the bathroom tile of their most embarrassing moment recently. And I'm like, oh my God, like that was like 25 years ago. I can't believe that you
like yesterday.
That's amazing. Yes. And it sounds kind of rough.
If you're just tuning in, it's WMNF. The show is Down and Dirty. Today we're not very down and dirty because we're enjoying Thanksgiving. I'm John Dingfelder, and I'm joined by my co-host, Allison Hewitt, and by my daughter, Sadie Dingfelder, who has written a fascinating book. It's called Do I Know You? A Face-Blind Reporter's Journey into the Science of Sight, Memory, and Imagination. You can buy it on... Oh, I shouldn't say that. I'll get in trouble. All right. It is available.
One of the questions I also had you just mentioned it a minute ago about getting into studies. So... for those who don't have your science background or your connections, do you just Google studies, to maybe, connect yourself to maybe find out what's wrong with you? Because, they may, or if they have their child and they may have some concerns, how does one, connect with the studies, especially in the areas that you have done this research?
Yeah. I mean, if you have any sort of diagnosable condition, or a child who has some sort of diagnosable condition, which could include prosopagnosia, actually, you can look for studies in the National Institutes of Health clinical trial database. And you can get into like amazing studies where they're trying out brand new research, and I'm new treatments for things. And I got into one of these studies and actually tried to get treatment for my amblyopia / lazy eye / stereo blindness / strabismus. Basically, if your eyes don't line up, you can get into cool new studies that use virtual reality to help fix your problems seeing with both eyes at the same time.
So, and as a matter of fact, on page 267 of the book, in the appendix, you give practical advice to parents. You say, "Is my kid face blind?" And you give advice on identifying how parents can tell, for example.
Yeah. If your kid looks lost at school pickup, I bet I looked lost at school pickup.
You did.
That's a good sign. If your kids get separated from their class at school field trips. I was almost left behind at the Florida State Fair, I'm going to say, in 6th grade. Because I got separated from my class and could not find them because I didn't know what they looked like.
Plus, you enjoyed all those little animals.
And I preferred to nap in cracker country.
But you know what? The other thing that I've always noticed is you don't really care for movies that have a lot of character plots and this person's related to this person and soap opera type stuff,
Yeah.
Why?
Because I can't tell the people apart. Yeah, it's really common for people who are face blind to figure it out. Because, in fact, the guy who came up with the word face blind figured out that he was face blind because he said to his partner, why do they always have close-ups of people in television shows? How are you supposed to remember who anyone is if you can't see their bodies?
Wow.
And his partner was like, most people can just do it with the faces.
Allison, when you were growing up, how would you describe your childhood in terms of friends? Did you have a lot of friends or just one or two friends or no friends at all or what?
Well, I'm really close to my sister.
Okay.
And so she and I were best friends.
We'll give her a shout out up in Atlanta.
Yes. She's my absolute best friend. And let's just say that because I lived in a world of books, I didn't have a lot of friends because I preferred the made-up world. I preferred to be in fantastical places rather than engaging. So,
did you feel lonely or just like you enjoyed the world you were in?
I was never lonely. Yeah, I had very active parents who made sure that I did volunteer work and was after school, and I was on the swim team. I played basketball. I ran track. So I was not the goofy one. I was actually athletic. But I think my parents were a little bit concerned that I would prefer to be in a corner in the book and not talk to anybody except
on the nerdy side, but yes. I could see it. I could see it. But
so they engaged me and put me out there in the world.
You're still a do-gooder. Your parents taught you well. You were a do-gooder then, and you are now. Oh, Sadie, so you describe a little bit in the book about being lonely or isolated. Again, makes me feel sad and guilty.
Don't feel guilty.
Wow. So tell us a little bit about that.
It's so interesting.
And how you and I dealt with that.
Well, it's really interesting because, I, when I wrote my article, I wrote an article for the Washington Post before I wrote the whole book, right? And the article for the Post, when that came out, I started getting emails from people who, because I wrote in the Post how I was super lonely and I didn't have any friends. And so, but I started getting all these emails from people that were like...
That you had grown up with.
That I had grown up with that were like, what are you talking about? I was your friend. And I just feel like I had a lot of trouble building real relationships with people because I couldn't recognize most people from moment to moment. So I'm always having the same surface level conversation about the weather, who knows what. And so from my perspective, I didn't really have friends, but from other people's perspective, I did. And so it's really impressive. I mean, it's just like such a shocking thing to learn about your past from a different angle when you're freaking 40 years old, and to be like, oh my God, I did have some friends.
But Sadie, my favorite part of the book is that you said I had a heroic moment.
Yeah.
in rescuing you from this loneliness.
It's true. I was pretty lonely, and then Dad, after I accidentally ignored a friend of mine or a former classmate in a grocery store.
I was like, Sadie, didn't you know?
Did you see her?
That was Susan, and you guys spent 4 years together in elementary school.
So yeah, after that, I was like, well, I didn't know who it was. How am I supposed to talk to someone who I don't know who they are? And Dad's like, you don't need to know who people are to talk to them. Just ask them about themselves, and they'll think you're the most fascinating person in the world. And I took that advice back to college because I was like 18. I was my freshman year, and my whole first semester of college was very, very lonely. And then from then on, I had like a whole campus full of friends. I had random women on my bed telling me about their ex-boyfriends. I didn't know who they were. I didn't know who the ex-boyfriend was, but like I was very popular.
You just became a very good listener.
I don't know if that's true, but
a listener, and apparently the stories, because that's one of the things that really stood out to me when your friends were like, we didn't really look at you to be able to do that. We just wanted to hear your wonderful stories, which again, I attest to, because your book are full of wonderful stories that you weaved in with the science. So especially because I read the book through a 50-year-old brain, but I really think the younger me could have really connected to, this is maybe why I am like I am. So I really appreciate that you tell your story. I really appreciate, although the details are a lot of details, that you added stories, so I didn't get lost in the details. And the brain that takes me to fantasy, you took me into facts with your stories and how
cool.
the folks stay. So it's a really great read.
Maybe the moral of the story is, and I think I've taken a little bit away from the book. You use the term neurotypical, but is anybody really neurotypical? I mean, I think we all have our own, what's the opposite? The diverse neurodiversity,
Well,
and depending on, what we're talking about, which part of the brain, which part of our, habits and skills and stuff, right?
Kind of like. Yes, no one is going to. So, like, let's imagine a whole battery of tests, as they call it, where you get all of your cognitive abilities sort of perfectly measured. This doesn't exist, but we're just going to imagine it. Almost no one is going to land in the 50th percentile of everything, right? But most people stay within what they call one standard deviation. So you're going to stay within, I forget exactly, but like within 30%. Most people are not going to be more or less than 30%. Mm-hmm. But people who are neurodivergent actually tend to land in the bottom, like 5 to 10% and the top 5 to 10%. So you end up with what looks like a very spiky profile. So if you have a kid who's in school and they're like, we know your kid's brilliant, but they can't read, so we think that they have dyslexia. That's a classic thing where it's like, well, they're killing it in math and, whatever, but they're really struggling in this one area. So we think they have, a learning disorder. But I think in the long run, that kid probably, if you get diagnosed with one of these labels, you probably meet the criteria for a few others. And to my mind, what that says is that our categories are not very good yet, which makes sense because we don't understand anything about the brain really yet. But there is a group of people who are neurodivergent and who tend to land outside of what they would say 2 standard deviations of the mean on various things. And so, again, I thought I would be in the 40th percentile for face recognition, but I was in the 2nd percentile for face recognition. And
so Lynn and I really love the show Monk. Okay, do you ever watch it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that part of that is I guess he's on the spectrum. He's perhaps autistic. I don't know, but he's freaking brilliant. He solves detective mysteries and just has that yin and yang where one part of the brain is doing something a little unusual, and then the other part is just off the charts brilliant. And it's a beautiful story.
And people use the word, someone's spacey or not really paying attention, but you understand that could describe what you were feeling or how I was growing up, in that
right.
I was not really spacing out, and it's just that the real world was boring, and the world that I created in my head, it was a lot more interesting.
Totally.
So,
yeah.
If you want to join the conversation, we're talking to Sadie Dingfelder about her book, Do I Know You? A Faceblind Reporter's Journey into the Science of Sight, Memory, and Imagination. Sadie Dingfelder is here with us. You can join the conversation at 813-239-9663. I'm John Dingfelder, joined with Allison Hewitt, and this is Down and Dirty on WMNF. 813-239-9663. Let us know what you think about this. Do you have any of these conditions or diverse attributes that we've been talking about? So, Sadie, before we run out of time, I was curious about causation.
Oh.
Again, this goes to did Dad do something that caused this?
Oh my God.
Or anything like that. And you do bump on that into the book a little bit.
Yeah. I think that, once I found out I was face blind, I was like, why am I face blind? So I started investigating that. And I remembered that I had had a visual disorder that I thought had been cured by 2 surgeries at age 1 and 9, colloquially known as lazy eye.
As a baby, within a few months, we looked at you and you were slightly cross-eyed.
Yeah.
Or your eye would wander. I shouldn't say cross-eyed, because your eye would wander out more than anything. And so we did what parents do. We took you to the hospital up at Shands. The Lions Club paid for the surgery, and you had surgery. It was one of the most traumatic events as a young parent to have your little 1-year-old wheeled away, to surgery. But fortunately, the surgery was fine. Maybe and then you had the same thing, I think, when you were 8 or 9.
Right.
The surgery was fine, but you're saying it was kind of not the best thing to do?
Yeah, I would say today, it's still very common for people to get what is known as eye realignment surgery, or surgery for your quote-unquote strabismus. But the thing is, my eye was not lazy or wandering. It's actually my brain was asking that eye to look away and to not converge with my other eye so that I wouldn't see double. It was suppressing the information from that eye. And so basically, most people learn to see and with both of their eyeballs working in concert.
In
stereo, yeah. Both of your eyes are working together, and they give you one picture of the world, one 3-dimensional picture of the world, with much richer depth cues than I have. My world is flat as a painting. So the people there's a percentage of people's eyes just don't get it together. And so their brains are like, well, I can't see double. That's a threat to life, So it suppresses all the information coming from one of your eyes. And that eye, it asks it to turn towards the blank screen of a wall or of your nose. So what is seen by many doctors as a muscle problem, and in some cases it is a muscle problem, but generally speaking, it is a neurological problem. And so the surgery does not align your eyes as well as your brain can do it, and often it can't even really get it close enough. So surgery will tend to actually just mess up your alignment worse. And so anyway, I end up with one eye stuck a little bit higher than the other one. And now with modern vision therapy, I still can't get them lined up because of my surgeries, but I can get them lined up with prism glasses.
Yeah. Okay. Allison, I'm sure you got a kick out of her driving stories, but let's take a phone call. We got, and I always mess up your name. I'm going to go with Layla in Brandon.
Nope. Mr. Finger.
Well, you mess up my name. I'll mess up your name.
Fair.
All right.
Leela. But anyway, I love hearing your daughter's voice, and I just appreciate this conversation because I was in neurosurgery at Tampa General from 86 to 96. And
wow.
I specialized in neuro, but I did all kinds of surgeries. But my entire life, I could relate to everything she was saying as far as the not identifying the face, and I'm very uncomfortable. So I'm going to do that test. But
yeah.
I think In my career professionally with my health food store, I have helped about 500 kids get off of Ritalin, Concerta, and all those things because so many kids are unique and they're so smart. And we don't give them toolboxes, 2 cards and index cards. And
we just drug them up and try and get them to behave, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and they're brilliant kids, but I've seen so many amazing kids go on to graduate school, and I've got a master's adopted son that, all these people that are so misdiagnosed in America. So it's so refreshing to hear. I'm going to go and buy your book.
Yay.
But anyway, it's just a refreshing, nice conversation this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leila. And
okay. Yeah.
I'm not going to plug her book, but I will say that on Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock at Jan Platt Library in Tampa, over in South Tampa, Sadie will be there to talk more about her book. So if you want to,
7 o'clock.
It's 7 o'clock and on Tuesday.
So what we'll have to do is get away from the soup kitchen early, have the food pack for the homeless on Morgan Street, and come and listen to her lecture at 7. I'll bring my volunteers with me.
Wonderful.
Wow,
Jan Platt Library. You can ask questions. Jeff Patterson from Channel 8 is going to be there to
that'll be wonderful.
To be the MC.
Nice to meet you. And your dad is wonderful. Your mom is wonderful. And I just love your family.
Thank you. I can't wait to meet you.
Very sweet.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right, if you want to join the conversation, 813-239-9663. We're talking to Sadie Dingfelder, who wrote a book recently. It's really the culmination of about 20 years of science and science writing and Washington Post writing and self-discovery. And it's called Do I Know You? A Faceblind Reporter's Journey into the Science of Sight, Memory, and Imagination. That's Sadie Dingfelder, Dingfelder.
So, as you said, that sometimes a diagnosis means you potentially may have another diagnosis. So, were you shocked when you went through the face blindness test to then get what's the other diagnosis that you have?
Aphantasia, stereo blindness.
Yes. Is that normal, or were you surprised that led to another testing, to another test, to another study?
Yeah, I was. I thought that once I finished my face blindness sort of investigation, I thought I was done, but I was not done. It turns out my brain is really interesting enough to, I was in like dozens of studies, and my brain, I've been scanned for a total of maybe at least 30 or 35 hours.
35 hours of sitting still.
Are you going to donate your brain to science?
I mean, if they want it, but they probably don't.
So you in researching for the book, which, by the way, who is your publisher?
Little Brown.
That's one of the big publishers left in this country. In researching for your book, you got to interview some famous face-blind people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Everybody except for Brad Pitt.
I tried so hard. If anyone knows Brad Pitt, let him know that I'm trying to talk to him. But I did talk to Steve Wozniak. He was the founder of Apple, one of the co-founders.
Co-founder, yeah.
And he got face blind from a plane accident. So he got it from traumatic brain injury, which is relatively unusual. And I also talked to Jane Goodall, but her interview did not end up in my book just because it wasn't interesting enough. But
what did she want to talk about? Chimps?
She wants to talk about conservation, which is great.
But how about the politician? What's his name?
Yes.
Colorado.
Hickenlooper.
Yeah.
Senator Hickenlooper from Colorado.
And believe it or not, I've always been a big fan of his.
He's cool.
Yeah, he's a neat guy.
Yeah. Yeah. He found out that he was face blind at midlife, just like me. And he said it gave him the confidence he sort of became a social butterfly that he always should have been. He was very shy and anxious before because he couldn't recognize people. And
he started as a scientist and ended up being a bar owner.
Yeah, now he's a politician. So very major life change because he was anyway, he's totally face blind, and it's really hard in the Senate to tell people apart because they're all old white dudes.
All of them.
Yeah.
Yes, too many of them.
A lot.
I won't take that personally. Skip. Old white dudes.
I mean, you guys could fit in the Senate. It's not that rude.
Sadie, your final statement in the book probably brought some tears to my eyes this morning when I was reading it again. maybe I should let you read it. I'll read it. It said basically you have 3 neurodivergent brain issues, and that you describe them, unless you know it by heart, as the grains of sand in my oyster, irritants around which I have built the pearls of sadiness. The pearls of sadiness. And when I read that, it's kind of like, well, nobody who knows you really would understand that. but Sadie is a very unique person, a very unique young lady, and those are the pearls of sadiness. Now I got her crying. And then she goes on to say, face blind, intense friendliness, stereo blindness, eternal outsider, SDAM, storyteller. Those are all the things that make you Sadie.
Yeah.
I am all these things. I just love that part. Mm-hmm. I am all those things.
Right. So
not all those things are you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think our listeners might be curious, because everybody was writing a book or has a book in mind. I'm going to write a book. You know what I mean? And you did it. I'm sitting here looking at the hard copy version, and when the soft copy's coming out, whenever. There's a book in front of me with your name on it.
It's so great.
I think you should give a little bit of advice to people on how to do that.
Oh, yeah, sure. The best advice for being a writer is just to write. You don't need anyone's permission. You don't need to
get a degree in writing.
No, you can be a high school dropout and be a great writer. You could just read a lot. That's what you have to do, though, is just read a ton, and your brain will just automatically learn how to write, I feel like.
Whenever I write, Lynn says it sounds like lawyerese.
Lawyerese. Yeah, it's because what you eat is what you are, right? So if you read a bunch of law stuff, you're going to become a bad writer. You need to read really good books, well written.
All right, so now you're a writer, but how do you get to publishing a book, like really publishing? And I know, okay, I'm not going to put it down. There's self-publishing now.
Yeah.
Which is okay, but that's a difficult row to hoe.
Yeah.
But you got it published by one of the big publications or publishers in the country.
Yeah.
So you just knock on their door?
No, you have to get an agent, and there's whole books with lists of agents. You have to find one that specializes in the type of book you're interested in writing. Oh, and the trick is to actually get other books that are just like yours or in the same genre and read the acknowledgments, because everyone thinks they're agents. Oh. So find the genre of book that you want to write.
Very clever.
Yeah, read the acknowledgments, reach out to that specific agent, and then accept the fact that agent will probably think your book idea is like kind of bad, but they will help you shape it into a book idea that you can sell to a publisher. Mm-hmm. So my original book idea was like, I'm hilarious. I'm like David Sedaris. I'm always getting into funny experiences. I want to write a collection of essays. And my agent was like, no one reads essays unless you're already famous.
Well, that's the book I always told you to write.
Yeah.
Like Life with Sadie, because she's got some hilarious things that have happened to her in her 45 years, and eventually, I guess, when you get really famous doing this stuff, then you can write that other book.
I encourage everyone to look for the driving story in the book once they buy the book.
The driving
story is hilarious.
Definitely funny. Anyway, those are good stories. You're right. They have to buy the book to read the driving stories, because we don't have enough time to tell them right now. We got about 2 minutes left. But so you put a lot of work into this. Would you do it again? Has it been a good experience?
Oh my gosh, it was a good experience. I'm a little tired of writing about myself at this point. I think I'm kind of done. There's nothing else interesting about me. For now. But I can go have adventures and tell people about my adventures. I want to write about people with weird neurological disorders like Oliver Sacks did. I'm already starting to do it on my website. And you
can plug your website.
SadieD.com, where I also recap Brilliant Minds and talk about how scientifically accurate it is.
Yeah. Oh, actually, I'll put it the WMNF way. If you're interested in more information on these issues Sadie has been talking about, you can go to her website, which again is
Sadie.com. SADIE.com.
SADIE.
John, did you have to use your voice, your radio?
Yeah, that was WMNF voice. It was cool and hip.
It really was.
It doesn't come out of my mouth very often. Okay. Going back, if you want to hear more, if you want to meet the author, if you want to meet the author's dad, if you want to meet Allison, I think you're going to be there.
I will be there.
We're all going to be there at the Book Talk book signing event, which is this Tuesday, December 3rd, 7 p.m. at Jan Platt Library in Tampa, which I think is right off Henderson and Manhattan. Thank you, ladies, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for the book.
Thank you.
Yeah, The Skinny is on next with Ray Roa, Mitch Perry, and Ben. And I don't know what they're talking about today. I don't see a guest. Over there, so maybe they're just chatting about Thanksgiving. Skip, thanks for your help.
Glad to be here.
And,
Thank you.
And Irene, we hope you had a wonderful holiday.
This is WF